Out on the campaign trail, Hillary Clinton has tried for a while to avoid the issue of her email server scandal. Recently, she has taken to finally addressing it in the rare media encounters that she allows. Over the weekend, here's what she said about what she called the confusing aspect of the private email server that she maintained while Secretary of State.
At the end of the day, I am sorry that this has been confusing to people and has raised a lot of questions, but there are answers to all these questions, and I will continue to provide those answers, and those answers have been confirmed and affirmed by the State Department and by other government officials, and eventually I'll get to testify in public, and I'm sure it will be a long and grueling time there, but all the questions will be answered, and I take responsibility, and it wasn't the best choice.
Okay, so there we go. She's got it neatly in a little package there. She's sorry that it's confusing, but all will be addressed in time. It'll be a grueling process, but everything's been asked and answered, and she wishes that she had done things a little bit differently. I wonder how Congressman Trey Gowdy, who serves as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security for the Judiciary Committee, who has been chairing the Benghazi Committee, who has been dealing with this fairly intimately for a number of months. He's, of course, the Republican congressman who represents South Carolina's 4th Congressional District. Let's welcome back to the Mike Gallagher Show on our guest line, Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, sir, how have you been?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm well. I was kind of glad to hear Mrs. Clinton say that over the weekend. It's all been asked. It's been answered. She's sorry. It's a little confusing. It's a little complicated, but again, nothing really to see here.
I'm sure she does not mean it this way, but whenever somebody says, I'm sorry that you're confused, I kind of reinterpret that as I'm sorry that you're not smart enough to follow what's going on.
That's a bad start.
I do. I think she's right. I am not that smart, but I do think I understand what was going on, and she's right. She has answered several of the questions. The problem is every answer she's provided has been demonstrably false. So that's why we keep asking.
And it doesn't just stop with Mrs. Clinton, does it? The House Select Committee grilled Jake Sullivan. Now, Jake Sullivan is a top policy aide of Mrs. Clinton's. He has been stated or rumored to be a shoo-in to be the national security advisor in a Clinton administration, should that become a reality. What did you glean from what Jake Sullivan had to say?
Well, we interviewed Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Mills last week. Mr. Sullivan's interview was classified because of the nature of the questions we asked him and the nature of the answers he provided.
And Cheryl Mills is one of Mrs. Clinton's longest-serving aides. It was reported 8 hours before your committee.
I'm sure it seemed longer for her to be in a room with that many politicians. But, they both answered every question that we had, for which they were able to answer. And what I mean by that is sometimes your memory is better than it is at other spots. But they answered the questions the committee has. In Jake's instance, Mr. Sullivan's instance, he was the policy director, so it is important for us to understand if you're going to have a physical presence in a country as violent as Libya, what policy were you pursuing?
Right.
And Ms. Mills, of course, was the chief of staff at all relevant times. So if you want to ask about Sidney Blumenthal and his efforts to get hired by the State Department, if you want to ask about the ARB, then Ms. Mills would be one of the people you'd want to talk to.
She'd be one of the go-to people. Now, one of the takeaways, it seems, from the testimony, as reported anyway in the media, was that Benghazi continues to be a key point of concern. The majority of Sullivan's questions seem to revolve around the State Department's policies in Libya. Sullivan was in, as you put it, a unique position to talk about the state's physical presence in the country. Cheryl Mills admitted she reviewed and suggested changes to the government's official report on the Benghazi terrorist attack. And yet, here we go, a California Democrat, Adam Schiff, wrote in an op-ed piece in the New York Times Friday, it's time to disband the Benghazi Committee. This disconnect is just amazing to me, Congressman Gowdy.
Yeah, I wish Adam had been there last week, and I do understand members have obligations in their district, and I do too. But what Adam would have heard after Cheryl Mills testified is three things. Number one, she thanked the committee for their hard work. She thanked the committee for their important work, and she thanked the committee for its professionalism. So you have Hillary Clinton's top lawyer, top counselor, chief of staff, who spent 9 hours in a committee room, and she didn't complain about a single question she was asked. And frankly, Mike, the email questions came up very late in the afternoon. And then you have a member of the committee who was not present for either one of those interviews complaining that it's all about Hillary Clinton. The only reason that anyone is talking about Secretary Clinton is because of this unusual email arrangement she had.
Right. Well, indeed, as I understand it, Adam Schiff has attended one of the more than 45 interviews conducted by the Select Committee on Benghazi. How do you go to one of the 45 meetings and then write a piece in the New York Times saying it's time to disband this committee?
Well, Mike, I don't keep attendance again. Adam's a former federal prosecutor. I would really like him to use, he has a very unique and good skill set. I would prefer that he use his skills to help us get documents from the State Department and find witnesses, as opposed to, voting against forming the committee, saying all questions have been asked and answered. I do get that they are in a very difficult position. Many of the Democrats have already endorsed Secretary Clinton. Their job, they view it, is to protect her. I do not view their job as to protect the former Secretary of State. I view it as to find out for the 4 who were murdered and their family and friends and our fellow Americans what happened. So we just kind of have a fundamental divide on what the purpose of the committee is.
Congressman Trey Gowdy is with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show. It's got to be difficult for you, Congressman, to distinguish between your responsibilities as the committee chair and, let's face it, you're a Republican congressman. You're as concerned as the rest of us about the direction of the country. It must be tough to draw that line in the sand between getting the job done through the committee and realizing the political ramifications of this investigation. I mean, this is ostensibly deciding who's going to be the next commander-in-chief. How hard is it for you to separate those two worlds?
Well, Mike, first of all, thank you for the question. It's a wonderful question. I had the best background you can possibly have before you come to Congress to be able to separate the two. Right. When you are a prosecutor, it is not your job to get a conviction. It is not your job to get a certain result. It is your job to fairly pursue a process and search for facts. And I know that sounds hokey, and I know that sounds trite, but it doesn't sound hokey or trite to anyone who's ever been a prosecutor. My job is to find out what happened in Benghazi. It is not my job to determine who the next president of the United States is, and I would not have accepted the job if that's what I've been asked to do. And as a credit to Speaker Boehner, I don't think he's ever mentioned Hillary Clinton's name to me in a single conversation I have had with him. Right. If he has, I can't remember it, and he certainly didn't do it when he formed the committee. Now, he may very well have asked what's going on with the emails, but he's been really clear to us. I want you to find out what happened in Benghazi. Whoever our nominee is, and the media and Reince Priebus and everyone else can figure out 2016 politics. But my job will be done before that happens, and I want to be able to look the family members of those 4 in the eyes and say, we did a job worthy of their sacrifice, and we followed a process that even Democrats ought to respect if they weren't so caught up in defending their putative nominee.
And the fact of the matter is, very few people on either side of the aisle doubt the integrity of Trey Gowdy. I mean, rarely do you hear somebody question your integrity, except if you're James Carville. Last week, the longtime Democrat strategist and aide to the Clintons appeared on MSNBC, and he specifically called you out as being a tool of the Koch brothers. And he just insisted that the Clinton email scandal is petering out. There's nothing to it. And the chairman, Trey Gowdy, is a tool of the Koch brothers. So not everybody is politically neutral on the subject of Congressman Trey Gowdy.
Yeah, I'm only laughing simply because I have never met nor had a conversation and could not identify the Koch brothers if you gave me a 5-person lineup. I've never talked to them. I've never met with them.
You're not a very good tool of them then if you don't even know who they are, if you can't recognize them.
I'm not a good tool of anybody. Again, I am sure that Carville and Lanny Davis and Podesta and Democrats like Adam Schiff and others who have already signed on with Secretary Clinton, I am sure that they are very, very frustrated. But their frustration needs to be with whoever recommended or failed to stop this unprecedented email arrangement. Their frustration should not be with me. Mike, I never mentioned her name the first 3 public hearings we had.
Right.
We've not interviewed a person named Clinton yet.
Right.
We've interviewed 40-some-odd people, only 2 of which have any connection with her at all. So I get that they're frustrated, and I guess Dr. Freud wrote at length about projecting your anger onto other people. Maybe that's what Carville's doing. But for me to be a tool of someone that I have never met, never talked to, is curious.
Curious to say the least. Can you clear one thing up, Congressman, about the report when the server was finally turned over to the FBI? Are you able to tell us, was the server taken from the Clintons, or was it, or did they voluntarily turn it over?
Well, she says she turned it over. My experience with the Bureau has been, they don't send calligraphy invitations for which you can RSVP. But I want to be fair because I wasn't present for it. It may vary. I can't tell you whether the Bureau said, we need the server, we can send a subpoena if you want it, but we need it. I can't tell you if Kendall said, here it is. I just know this. The former secretary has a way of phrasing things that, for the most part, cast her in the best light possible. For instance,
you mean like wondering if wiping a server involves a dust cloth?
Well, that, but also, she said I turned over everything and I had no duty to do so. I mean, what? Are you kidding me? What you turned over, half of it, by your own admission, is public record. What do you mean you had no obligation to turn over the public record? That is dumbfounding to me.
But it's the same kind of answer as the dust cloth, and that's obviously a tactic. One of her aides said the same thing the other day. He said on television, I don't know what the interviewer said, something about wiping the server clean. He goes, I don't know what wiped means. What do you mean by wiped? I thought, do these people think we're stupid? I mean, is the plain dumb game really the strategy now that they're reduced to?
Well, I can tell you this, Mike. You never get very far in life insulting the jury, and while she and some of her aides may think that this is a joking matter, the majority of my fellow citizens, irrespective of politics, do not think it is a joking matter. So
Correct.
I think you have seen their tactics begin to change a little bit. She did at least apologize for us not being bright enough to follow what she did, and I think in a week or two she's probably going to apologize just flat out for what she did, because nothing has worked so far.
Not yet.
She's not persuading my fellow citizens.
Final question, Congressman Trey Gowdy. Is there anything you'd have done differently to this point in terms of this entire investigation?
Mike, yes, I would have been less naive, and I hate to say that, having spent 16 years as a prosecutor, but the legislative branch is not terribly well equipped to conduct investigations, and in other words, I can't send the sheriff to get documents. I don't have access to a grand jury. It took me, and it's solely my fault, nobody else, no other member of the committee, no member of staff. It took me a little while longer than it should have to figure out the State Department had no interest whatsoever in producing documents to me.
Because you were giving them the benefit of the doubt.
They wanted a reset. They didn't want a bunch of public fights, and I guess I just assumed that Secretary Kerry would care enough about his reputation that he wouldn't waste his capital protecting his predecessor. But I have been dead wrong. We are having a very difficult time getting documents from the State Department, and frankly, their defense of her email arrangement has been staggering.
Yep, it's been hard to just believe and comprehend. I'm just glad you're there continually, carrying the torch here and trying to get to the truth. Congressman Trey Gowdy, anybody who knows you knows that's not a surprise. I very much appreciate your time. Keep fighting the good fight, sir.
God bless you, Mike. Thank you.
God bless you. Congressman Trey Gowdy from my beloved state of South Carolina, and giving us an update on Hillary's email fiasco.